Hello and welcome to a SoulLink AI Alpha tutorial video. This is to describe the details of the scheduler demo scene that I've just released. This has a lot of features in it to show how to do task schedules and also how it integrates with other SoulLink AI components. So before we go any further, I'll just demonstrate the scene. This is the scheduler scene. It can be found in the SoulLink AI Demos Scenes folder. It's called Scheduler. Go ahead and run this. Alright, so what we have is there's a kind of a fake house, the Ellen character, and at 9:30 she will wander over to this simulated field where there's a bunch of plants that have spawned. And as she finds the plants, she will pick them up, playing a slightly little kind of sort of bend animation. And when it hits 3 o'clock, as we look at the clock down here, she will head back home. The other part of this is that I've got these kind of fake lanterns or lamps, and when the time gets past, I forget, 6:30 or something like that, these lights will automatically turn on. And now, yep, there they go, 6 o'clock. And so Ellen will kind of wander around here all night, for lack of anything better to do in this particular demo. And then at a certain point in time, this field will respawn plants. And then when it gets to the next day, 9:30 again, she'll go back off and pick plants again. This is just a basic example. I mean, Ellen could obviously be meant to do many tasks throughout the day. So we'll just stop it there, and now I'm going to go into detail and explain how this is all set up. Alright, so this Ellen character was created from the Ellen template, animator template, and she just has basic locomotion animations and initially set up as just a wander task. So what we did, first of all, we wanted to make her capable of interacting with the plants. So the main thing you have to do there is if you select the AI and go into the Tools SoulLink Editor and go to AI, you'll see that there is already the interact sensor that's been set up. But if you didn't have one, what you would do is add a sensor using this button, and then add interactable to tell it what kind of interactable that you want Ellen to interact with. And before we did that, we had to set up interactable names. There was already this one called Cube and Lamp, which are just some demo ones I had in there. And I added this Flora one, which just means, plant. Okay, so then I want to go back here, and now we'll show you where that sensor actually got added. Here it is here, interact sensor. I set the sensor range to 5. That basically tells you like at what range will Ellen detect interactable objects to interact with. And this is the tag that I'm using for the interactable objects. And then what type of interactable, here we have the flora. And if you look here, we can see all that information that we saw in the, except for the sound information. Here, I've got a probability of 100%, so if Ellen sees a plant and she's not otherwise engaged in some more higher priority task, she will definitely pick it up. If you want to change this to be much lower, then it would indicate that the AI may or may not interact with something. So if you have a character walking along a path and there's a bunch of flowers and the probability's, you say 10%, then she may decide to go pick them up or she may not. The sound clip is there. I don't have anything for this demo, but you could have it play a sound when the character decides it wants to interact with the object. You could, for instance, have a voiceover and say, "Oh, pretty flowers." and then she would go pick him up. This interact cooldown is just how many seconds to wait until after doing an interaction before you do another interaction. So if you don't want her to just do interactions constantly, if there's a lot of things to interact with, there would be a cooldown period. And this start inactive simply means that this sensor will be inactive at the start of the scene, and I'm going to be using tasks to turn them on when I want them on. That's how that's set up. Next thing is other components in the scene. So under SoulLink itself, we've completely set up the scene. We've got the SoulLink Manager, the SoulLink Spawner here. I've set up some various parameters. I've got a game time object and the debug canvas. And all these, mostly, the manager and the spawner and the pool manager are all added automatically when you run the spawner setup scene and the editor setup scene. Other things I have in the scene, I've got this field, call this the plant field. All I did was lay down a plane with some dirt texture on it, and I've set a destination point. So when I say I want to go to the field, I'm using this as the point that the character is going to go to. And then I also have the spawn area here. I've set it to use spawn bounds because I want it to be contained in this rectangular area. And I've set some other parameters here. You can analyze those. I have up to 10 plants will spawn. I have it to automatically reset the area after a 12-hour game time duration. And I have it unlimited repeats. And I also check to use local spawn data. And the reason why I do that is so I don't have to set up the spawn area in the spawner component itself. This is just a one-shot deal, so I just use local data. And all the spawning data is right here within the spawn area. And I'm using a prefab called interact-flowers. I'm going to explain that one a little later. And so that's it for the spawn area. What else do we have? We have this ambient sounds. I put a little an audio source to play some nature ambient sound. You can hear what that sounds like. Just some birds and a little wind, just for effect. And what else do we have here? These lamps that I said, these faux lamps. This is just a little prefab I made. It just has a couple of cubes, one with a light, and then there's a light attached. And you look at, it's got a lamp control, and it simply says at 17.5 it's going to turn the light on, and at 5.5 in the morning it will turn it off. And what is the light color? Very simple. And draw a halo. I think the camera also has to have something on it for the halo to work, so I don't think that's actually implemented. Other things, spawner, I made the Ellen character itself the player component, so for purposes of spawning. And so let's go to the plant itself. So in the field spawner, this interact flowers. Well, first of all, I used the prefab called interact to build it. So this is actually located in SoulLink AI Core prefabs. And just take a quick look at what the prefab looks like. It's already set up with the name interact, and under interact name it's got a interact task, a destination task, and a multi-state object. These are all things that are necessary to set up a multi-state interactable object. The idea is that you can have these states, in this case state 1 and state 2, and you can have objects under state 1 and different objects under state 2, or you can have objects on state 1 and no objects on state 2, so that you could have, in this case, where there's a plant when it's in state 1, and then when it's done interacting, that the plant goes away. So let's take a quick look at that actual plant again, see how we set this up. Okay, so under state 1, I took and gave it this vegetation small, which comes from the 3D environment pack from Unity. It's part of the AI package. I called it Interact Flowers. Also made this a spawnable component. And one thing I had to do is on spawned event handler, I told it to go to the multi-state object and set the state to state 1, because I want it to be in state 1 where there actually is vegetation whenever it spawns. Because when we're done interacting with it, we're going to be in state 2. So if we look at this, you can see the object end state is state 2. So when this interaction is complete, this task interact, it'll move to state 2, which, as you see here, is empty. There's nothing under state 2. So basically this one will be disabled, this one will be enabled, and it will no longer be a plant. Other things I have here, there is a start animation sequence. So when the character goes to interact, we have a named animation sequence called bend interact. I will show you where I set that up in the AI after this, but basically that just will play an animation so that when Ellen goes to the plant, it will look like she's kind of bending down a little to pick it up. There's also a possibility of having an end animation sequence, which in this case we don't need that. The destination tasks don't really need to do anything there, except it needs this so that when it wants to go to interact, it will use this task to move in that direction. The multi-state object, this is a single point type. There is a future kind, a multi-point, which we're not going to go into detail here, but that will be for things like if you had a park bench and you had 3 seats on it. You could have 3 possible places where an AI could interact with and sit down. And then if all those places are in use, then you can't interact with it. This tells it what kind of interact it is, and this is the flora. There are interact points. It's simply where the character will go to in order to interact. The toggle type is the interaction of toggle that allows unlimited use. This is like for a door that can be opened or closed. So, and in this case, no, it's not. But it might be a case where, oh, you interact with it to open it, and you interact with it again, and that would close it. These are the states that we have, state 1 and state 2. The default state is state 1, and the complete state is state 2. So when it's done interacting, it moves to state 2. There's a disable colliders on complete, and that's a good idea so that when it's done, it will not try to interact with it again. It won't even trigger. And then on interact complete event handler, I have that in order to call the spawnable on death. Now technically it's not dying, but what this does is allows the spawn area that it's spawning from to know that it's no longer there, that it's been effectively despawned or not in use anymore. And then it will consider it gone. So when it resets, it will be able to spawn again. And I think that's all there is to that. I made that as a prefab. And again, we put that into the field spawner here. Now, next thing would be to look under Ellen and see what we did here. Normally you just get one task in here and it just says wander task. So I modified this to put a little tasks object and then put that wander task underneath there, and then I've added these additional tasks. We have a go to field task, which is simply task destination, and it points to that field destination point, which is at the start of the field. And we also flag this as make wander home position. The reason why I do that is wandering, when you say you want to wander, instead of just wandering randomly in a certain range, it uses an origin point so that it's always within the range of that origin point. So when Ellen's here at home, her origin point is her starting point. But once we get to the field, we want her to wander around there. Then we want the origin point to be there so that she will only randomly wander within that area. So this is off by default, but you want to put it on for things like this. And we have, when we get to the, well, let's see, these aren't necessarily in the order that they're going to execute, so I'm just going to go over them one by one. Disable sensors is a task enable interact sensors, but with enable to false. So this will simply turn off the interactable sensors so that even if she did go buy something that was interactable, she would not even consider interacting with. We have to go to home, which basically goes to this front door point I put here, which would be in the front of the house. Again, we set that make wander home position so that when she gets back to home and starts wandering again, she'll wander in this area. I also have a stop wandering, which simply turns off the enable flag. So if it's wandering, it'll turn wandering off. And then there's enable sensors task, which task enable interact sensors with the enable turned on. Later I will talk about these start states and end states. It's a whole other thing. Don't need it for any of this right now. Now if we go back to Ellen and we'll look at the task scheduler and see how these are set up to actually function. So I have just one schedule called default, and under there's task lists. Now initially when you create the AI and add a wander task, you would have just this one wander task, and then in there you would only have one task, the wander task, which is what we have here. And this one just basically will freeform wander. Now I have the go to field task, and that one is set by schedule by time of day. This is very important because this will not trigger until a certain time of day is hit. And if we go down to time of day, we can look and see what is the hour and what is the minute. And this is going to be 9:30. So at 9:30, this task will start kicking off. Now this is more than just a single task. It's actually a task list. So these are lists of tasks. So go to field encompasses 3 tasks. First, I tell it to stop wandering, then go to the field, and then enable sensors. So we're going to stop the wandering around over here and then say just go directly to the field. When the Ellen gets to the field, the sensors will enable and she'll be able to detect the plants to interact with. And she'll interact with them for as long as she remains at the field. Then we have go to home, another time of day task, but this is going to be at 1500 hours, which is 3 p.m. We're going to disable the sensors so she doesn't get distracted and hang around trying to pick up stuff. And then she will go to home and then start wandering again when she gets home. And we have the auto start schedule, so this whole schedule will start immediately all by itself. And that is essentially everything you need to know about this particular demo. Thanks for watching.